apologetics. You know what I'm saying? Restoring black dignity with the gospel.
So, for those who are just joining this conversation, shout out to all the true schoolers out there, rocking with us, Adam Coleman, DNew, BK Apologist here on Tru-ID Apologetics. We're talking about, Kristi Burke. She has a YouTube channel where she's kind of like the warm, friendly, anti-Christian, I guess. That's kind of how she's framed her platform. And, she's got a list of scriptures here that she says that Christians often ignore. And it's pretty sketchy so far. We've had multiple misinterpretations of scriptures and so forth. But I think it's given us an opportunity to look into what the word actually says. And in some ways, maybe there is some correction needed, be able to engage that as well. So this next clip, BK will be unleashing his 3000 slide. And I'm sure we will all enjoy it. Oh man, here we go.
As is his custom.
As is right. It's like the Apostle Paul, like he went to the temple as was his custom. BK unleashed 1,000,000 slides.
Yeah.
Right, here we go.
For they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees you in secret will reward you. This is one of my favorite Bible passages, because how often do we have Christians claiming, I'll pray for you. Even if you don't like it, I'm going to pray for you. Or typing up their prayers on Facebook or in YouTube comments, or gathering in the streets to form prayer circles. Or I recently saw a video of Christians in like a restaurant, and they were like all gathered in this big table, just screaming and praying and really showing off their religion. Jesus is very clearly stating, don't stand in the streets. Don't be like the hypocrites. Your prayers don't need to be seen by everyone. When you pray, do it in secret. Go to your little prayer closet, talk to God. He'll see you, he'll hear it. And that's really all that matters. But do we really see Christians following this? Because I see it all the time. I get it in my comments all of the time. I have people writing out prayers or claiming they're going to pray for me. And I always respond, that's great. Pray if you want to pray, but telling me about it isn't going to do anything. It doesn't make a difference. And Jesus says, don't do that. You don't need to announce your prayers to everyone. You don't need to tell everyone you're praying, because you're just doing that to be seen. There's no reason to actually do it. If you really believe in prayer and the power of prayer, you could do it without telling a soul, and you'll see the results, right? And to those that do it, Jesus himself calls you a hypocrite. Not me. I'm not doing it. Jesus is. I'm just reiterating his words. So what about Luke?
All right. Can't preach nobody, can't pray for him. So, at least, well, you can't let them know you're praying for him for sure. Wow.
Obviously I've listened to this clip a few times, but listening to it again with the camera on me is just very difficult to keep my face fixed.
Yeah.
But just this my thoughts are all jumbled. Sorry. Just, she's literally putting Christianity to the test of her YouTube channel. Talk about talk about people coming into her YouTube comments and, saying this and this and this and this. What do you mean? The whole of Christianity is not your YouTube comment section. You have 0.00. Listen, Christianity is a global religion, okay? You are not being exposed to a global, the global Christianity community in your YouTube comment section. How ridiculous is this? You are hypocritical with respect, with all due respect. I say this with my eyebrows up and a slight smile. You're being hypocritical. The people that she's speaking against it is not. It's not the global community. The people that you're talking about is like 0.0000127% of Christians who probably, well, I won't say that. That's a sweeping judgment. And who am I to judge?
Right.
Very like frustrating to pick up what she's putting down. It's just ridiculous to me. Not on the level.
To your point, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, to your point, I was gonna say, like, I think she should rename the title of her video. I feel some kind of way about Christians in my chat. Because clearly she's had some interactions with people in her comment section that she's feeling pretty salty about. You know what I mean? And so she could have just told us that, but like, yo, cats in the chat is just really bugging me out. You know what I mean? And here's why, or something. I mean, and just kind of go from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that being said, too, listening to her experience and the things that she's saying, it's also a reminder to us as Christians to be good ambassadors of Christ, because people are watching and people are listening to us. And, it is shameful for people who claim to be Christians to act in the way that she's describing. We're not Kristi's not proponents of that, and we're not proponents of that either. We never want to be people who bring shame to Christ, and so, I think that's maybe something positive I can say from these clips, is that it's a reminder for us as Christians to really get it together when we need to get it together, pull it together, fix your things when you need to. Our goal, I always say this, I came up with this several years ago, but my goal is never to be in this. I feel like this is a good goal. My goal is to never be like DNew. Do not be like DNew. That's not going to get me anywhere. Do my best to be like Jesus. That's what, that's a reminder for us.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good.
Right.
Yeah. And to your point, I do think that, I know I joke about it, but to be fair, there are enough professing Christians out there who behave badly that could give somebody the impression that that's how Christians are. And what I'm trying to say is the counterbalance to that is to let's actually do our due diligence and be mindful people, so that we don't label all Christians for the behaviors of some. And if you're that Christian out there who's been belligerent and mean and intrusive or whatever, then yeah, cool. Check that. You know what I mean? It's just the generalizations, though. When you take a minority of people and make it the whole, that's when I think you end up with a dangerous type of labeling that just isn't helpful in the public discourse.
Yeah, it would be different if she qualified her statements throughout the video, and she did say a little bit at the top of the video that she realizes that there's different types of Christians. But I feel like her scope of Christianity is very, very slender, very narrow. She's describing in many places, or we're going to maybe get to this clip shortly, she's describing Christian as being this American religion. Christianity is not an American religion. Half the people never has been. And so again, just her scope is, we talked about microfiches earlier. her view and her radius is very narrow and small.
Man, so for someone who's so against judging, man, was she being super judgy in this clip?
Yeah.
How do you know the intent of a group of believers that you see in the public praying? How you know that you know for a fact that they're doing it just so they could be seen? You know that. That's facts.
Yeah.
Right.
How you know that?
Right. Yeah. Or if they say they're praying for you, you're just doing that because you can be seen. Like, how does she know that?
Yeah.
Right.
And for those who do tell her that, right, they're trying to show that they love and care for you. Like, you shouldn't be so against someone saying, hey, I'm going to speak to my creator on your behalf. because they don't have to do that. There's a whole bunch of other people they could pray for. If they're taking time out of their communication with their creator to talk about you and care about you, you shouldn't take umbrage to that. Also, it seems like you have an issue with people in public advocating their allegiance towards their creator, right? I hope you have the same energy for all the sports fans that you see at the local pub that you go eat, that you see a bunch of fans next to the flat screen TV cheering on their team in public.
Right.
I hope you have a problem with them too. Right? Because they're publicly advocating what they have aligned themselves to. They wear jerseys with the names of the sport and with their favorite athletes. And let's go Jets. Let's go Cowboys. Are you offended at that too? And they're doing it to be seen. Right? So anyway.
That's true. Right.
So
but I mean, to your point. Okay. No, go ahead.
So
I think that's a great point, and you use the word allegiance, and I think that less to go over some like people's heads. Much of a good segment of the uses of the word faith in the New Testament are really pointing to this idea of allegiance, having a type of love-based loyalty to God the Father, to Yahweh, I should say, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's not something that's just specific to Christians. Like people have allegiance to all kinds of things, people, rocking the American flag or whatever it may be. So, if we, like you said, let's keep the same energy. If you have a problem with one person expressing allegiance, have a problem with all of them. But go ahead.
And I have a few. I'll just keep it at this though, right? Matthew 6.
You do not have a few slides. I don't believe that, but go ahead.
Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. I'm going to stop right there.
Yeah.
That's the issue. Don't do this just so you could be seen.
Right.
Jesus is not saying don't do this in public. He's saying don't do this in public with the intent to be seen.
Right.
There's a condition here. He's not saying don't go out and publicly declare the praises of God. He's saying don't do it just so that people can see you.
That's what it is.
Right. Hey, can I say something real quick, BK?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to cut you off. Maybe you'll get to this, so you can cut me off. But to your point, like when Jesus is saying these things, because again, this is again drawn from the Sermon on the Mount, right? This is the chapter 6 that I was referring to before. And so when Jesus is saying these things, he's not pulling like random moral statements out of the air, right? He's actually speaking about a specific practice that people were doing at that time. Okay. There were Pharisees, particularly, who or people who felt that they were of high religious estate, status, I should say, who actually would in public places make a spectacle of prayer in public, and they would have things like tassels on their clothing. That the longer the tassels was like the longer that they had been praying and things of that nature. And so they actually would pray in public specifically for the purpose of being seen by others as being pious, holy, and so on and so forth. So like this is not just like some sort of truism that Jesus is just kind of throwing out as like a general moral principle. He's saying, no, for y'all, like the people I'm actually talking to, there are people today who are doing this right now. Cut it out. You know what I mean? So I think that has to be brought into account as well. So when he's talking about praying in public for the purpose of being seen, it's not analogous to somebody coming on your YouTube channel and saying, "I'm gonna pray for you." That's not analogous. It's apples and oranges. It's not analogous to somebody praying at dinner, you know what I mean, or praying at wherever, just praying in public. Period. Like just simply praying in public. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the specific practice of being in the public square, praying out loud with the intent of being seen. That's what he's talking about here. And unless she's clairvoyant and like she's Jean Grey or something like that and can read other people's thoughts, I don't know how she can have this certainty, as she seems to express, that when people are saying they're praying for her, that she knows that they're just doing it to be seen.
Yeah.
My bad, BK. I know you was like mid slide and I messed you up, man.
No, I'm good. I just want it done. That's all I need to show.
Oh, okay. So you actually did have a few. Okay, cool. That's like a first ever. All right. So I'm gonna go to the clip before you find another slide. Oh man. But again, these generalizations are killing me, bro.
It's really bad. It's really bad when these talking points obviously would work for the type of audience that she draws to her channel. But when we talk about the conscious community, like when you really investigate these claims, like they don't hold much water. You're literally misinterpreting the Bible and then judging Christians for not going with your misinterpretation.
Yep.
Right. And actually, it was funny. Just real quick, she said something about like Christians praying in private, and she said something to the effect of, "But do we really see that though?" It's like, well, of course you don't see it because they've been praying in private. Right. How would you know? So, like, what you see people praying in public could be is probably a small percentage of the degree to which they're praying in their own private lives. More than likely. I mean, even if it's not, like, how would you know? Of course you don't see it because they're praying in private.
Right.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
Right. Anyway, here we go. I digress.
6:27 through 28. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. Imagine if every single Christian had this verse taped to their mirror and they saw it every single morning when they woke up. They made it their life's motto. I wouldn't have a channel. I wouldn't be here talking about this, because if Christians really did live out the love they claim to have, I don't think anybody would have a problem with them or what they're doing. But how often do you see Christians loving their enemies, blessing people who curse them? I see a lot of Christian hate in America. I see Christian nationalist views that are spreading like wildfire. I see them enacting policies that harm people and laughing about it. They're very gleeful about it. But how does that fall in line with loving your enemy? How does that fall in line with doing good to those who hate you? Christians really do claim that the woke left or liberals or atheists or any other group that isn't them, they're really claiming that we hate them. Then they are instructed biblically to love us, to pray for us, to bless us, and to do good to us, to be kind. But I don't see that very often. I do see it. I've had many Christians comment on my videos and leave really kind comments and say they disagree, but they wish me well. That's great. But those are very rare, very, very rare. And I think we all know it. In verse 29, it even goes further to say that if somebody slaps you, you're supposed to give them your other cheek. If somebody steals your coat, give them your shirt. I don't see that happening either. Think about the debate around guns. Now, I'm not here to give my position on gun control or anything like that. That's not what this is about. But if we consider the fact that the majority of people who are very, very enthusiastic about owning guns, about making sure everyone has guns, about limitless guns for all, usually they belong in that kind of conservative Christian category. But why do they want guns? To hunt? Maybe some of them. But most of them want it for protection. They want to protect themselves. But protect themselves from who? Their enemies? The enemies that God said to be kind to give your other cheek to? I mean, if somebody slaps you, are you supposed to shoot them according to the Bible? I don't think so. The Bible clearly says if you're slapped, give them your other cheek. That doesn't sound like I need a gun for protection. It sounds like God will take care of you if you are just kind and peaceful. But we don't really see a lot of kind and peaceful in Christian circles these days. Many Christians today feel as though they are under attack. There is a huge persecution complex within a lot of Christian circles, and they really believe that they have to fight back. But this verse specifically tells them not to. Christians often have home security systems. And while I think that's great and they should, the Bible says if somebody steals from you, to give them more. Don't call the police. If they come into your house and steal your jacket, give them your shirt. I can't think of a time I've ever heard of a Christian doing that. And, a lot of Christians like to kind of skirt around this and call it hyperbole or say it was an exaggeration. But my question is when does this apply? Like, what is the cutoff? Because obviously this was important enough to put in God's word. It was important enough for Jesus to say. He had a message, he wanted to share it. He says to turn the other cheek, to do good to your enemies, to bless those who curse you. And so at what point is it not hyperbole? When do you apply this ideology in your life? And there will always be justifications. There will always be a but. There will always be a Bible verse that they will bring up to show you why this Bible verse doesn't matter. But that just kind of further proves the point that all of this is very subjective and based on the whims of the person reading it rather than any kind of actual truth. And if Christians really did believe in Bible and Jesus and believed that God would take care of them, they wouldn't need to defend themselves. They wouldn't need to retaliate. They wouldn't need to fight back with lethal weapons or harsh words. Number 6, Romans 13:1.
I just said a mouthful.
That's a lot. That was a lot.
What you got, BK?
Okay. Well, she says that if Christians would have done that, loving and as that scripture says, she wouldn't have a channel. I disagree. The reason why I disagree is one. How can I say this? Her thinking is very fallacious. You're not thinking logically about scripture. You're having issues with context and comprehension. And as long as you have those issues, you're going to critique the Bible because you think you understand, and you're showing us in these clips that you don't. So that's one reason why you would have a channel, because you're thinking that you're correcting scripture, where in fact you're having a hard time thinking critically about these passages. 2, the second reason why you would have a channel is that you said that even though many Christians are not loving, you have seen Christians loving you. And that has done nothing for you. So how many Christians have to apply the scripture in order for you to not have a channel? Because you said you've had Christians display, what you think is Christ's love to you. And you're like, well, that's nice. And you keep, making these videos. So those Christians that have shown you actual biblical love have done nothing for you. So your lack of comprehension and your fallacious thinking and your hard heart not being responsive to the love that actual Christians are showing you are the reasons why you would still have a channel. So I will stop there.
This clip was out of all of the clips, I think this was a little bit more on the angering side for me, especially as a woman. This idea that because I'm a Christian, that if someone breaks into my home right now with the intent to, harm me, abuse me, maybe steal from me, this idea that I should not protect myself or want to protect myself because I'm a Christian is ridiculous. It's I think this clip most for me showed her her intellectual dishonesty and her disingenuousness. This idea, again, is something that I alluded to before, that Christians, because they're Christians, aren't afforded the basic opportunity to want to not be harmed, right? That because the Bible says that if someone slaps me, that I should give them the other cheek, which speaks to retaliation, right? It speaks to not retaliating. It doesn't speak to protecting yourself. It doesn't speak to that at all. And so I think for me, this was a little bit more of a little less of misinterpretation, but more so just disingenuousness. That, retaliation isn't afforded. I'm sorry, not retaliation. Protection isn't afforded to Christians because somehow evil in the world shouldn't happen to us, or if evil in the world does happen to us, we should just allow it to happen. It was a little bit angering. I won't lie.
Yeah, and I will say this, and I love how you put that from a woman's perspective, because listen to the clip. I didn't even think about that. Just how dangerous it could be for somebody to take the scriptures out of context the way that she did, because now you could have a woman such as yourself who thinks, okay, well, I can't protect myself, and now they're in harm's way unnecessarily. I didn't even think about that, but that's a great point. But in you sharing that, it made me think about just myself as a father, my husband and a father. And, I used to be totally like, anti-gun or what have you. But, then I started having kids, and I realized like, the reality is, and I know everybody, will not agree with me. Even Christians, obviously, we don't all agree on these things. There's some Christians who would consider themselves to be pacifists, and they have their reasons for that. I disagree. But I'm not. I know my view doesn't represent all Christians. Though Kristi seems to feel like some Christians represent all Christians. I'm making sure to be clear that I don't represent all Christians here. But I do believe that, particularly like when it comes to my kids, for example, loving them might entail in some instances protecting them, even if force or even lethal force is necessary. Like if somebody comes in my crib, hey, I feel sorry for you, because, if it's between you and my kids, you got to take that L, that permanent L. That's just what that is. So I do think that there are instances for the sake of where protection, love entails protection, and so that protection might come in various forms, even use of various levels of force, and so, taking it back to the scriptures though, I'm going to bring this up too. This is dang, I messed it up. So she brought up Luke chapter 6, and to your point, when it talks about somebody slaps you on the cheek, turns to them the other, again, you have to ask yourself, like, what is Jesus getting at there? I would argue that he's dealing with what you said is retaliation, and in particular, being slapped in the cheek, particularly in the public at that time, was just a sign of like public disgrace. For somebody to slap you across the face, it's a public indignity, right? And so I think what Jesus is getting at there is, we don't take vengeance upon people just for like public indignities. I'm saying that's the difference between protecting yourself. Somebody's like wailing on you, or attempting to take your life. That's very different than a single slap where it's just really just an indignity of some sort. I do believe that as Christians, we are called to endure levels of indignity. I think that that's true. If it be for, the gospel, and representing Christ well, I think that's true. And I think that's really the spirit of what he's getting at here. I don't believe that this verse is speaking to whether or not we should protect ourselves from harm. Right. Obviously, you shouldn't be going out of your way doing violence to people, Christian or otherwise. Nobody should be doing that, obviously. But certainly to protect oneself, I do think is appropriate. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that in the very same book, Luke chapter 22, I just want to read this real quick. Let me see where we at here. I want to say it is. Oh, I might be messing up. Excuse me. It's in Luke chapter 22, verses I think it's 35 through 38. So it says, then Jesus asked them, when I sent you without a purse, bag, or sandals, did you lack anything? They said nothing. And he said to them, but now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. It is written, he was numbered with the transgressors. I tell you that this must be fulfilled in me. Yes, what is written about me is reaching its fulfillment. Then then the disciples said, see, Lord, here are also 2 swords. That is enough, he replied. So for that time, Jesus' disciples was packing. Like they had that thing on them at all times. You know what I'm saying? So Jesus like, yo, you need to get a sword, sell your cloak and go get one. They're like, nah, we good. We got 2 joints right here. You know what I'm saying? We got 2 eaters right here with it. We ready out here. You know what I'm saying? And so moving forward into the scene where Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then the soldiers come in to arrest him. Peter pulled out the Glock. He pulled out the sword. You know what I mean? And sliced the dude's ear off. Now, one or two things is true. Either he was aiming for the ear and it was just really nice with it enough to where he could kind of give a warning shot to slice the guy's ear off, or he missed the guy's head. In either case, right? Peter was not playing when it came to that sword play. He knew what to do. You know what I mean? And so obviously, Jesus, his disciples, he certainly was aware of it. He told them to bring them, right? So this notion that some sort of like extreme, I'll call it extreme pacifism, where violence is never warranted, I just don't think that's what the Bible teaches. In light of the fact that we live in a broken world, a world in which there is sin and people do really bad things, I do not believe that the Bible is teaching, particularly in Luke chapter 6, that there's never a time to defend yourself. It seems to me that Jesus was aware that they had swords, and he was like, "Yo, that's cool. You got that thing with you. That's what's up." But nevertheless, going back to the turning of the other cheek, I think that's just a passage that's been taken out of context by Christians and non-Christians alike to mean like never defend yourself, and that's just not what it's talking about. It is saying we don't take vengeance. It is saying that we don't that there are occasions where we have to suffer public indignity. I think that's true. But it's not saying that there's never a case, where you ought to defend yourself. And it's definitely not saying, you should just let people break in your crib and steal stuff. You know what I mean? Like the notion of everybody that steals from you, like give them your cloak also, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't prevent them from stealing from you in the first place. Like that's 2 totally different things, right? Once you've already been stolen from, and how you respond to it is different than preventing people from stealing from you in the first place. Right. And I think she conflicts the both of those in her commentary. I'm sorry, you gonna say something, DNew?
No, I was just agreeing with you out loud. It's just, so Christians aren't supposed to have home security systems? What do you mean? What are you? So I'm not supposed to click my car when I leave it? Is this what we're saying? It's just,
right.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, when you're traveling, if you got your computer with you, your laptop, whatever, make sure you leave it on the front seat with the door unlocked and the sign saying "Please steal from me." Apparently, they don't make any effort to protect your items at home or what have you.
Jesus says, right, to be innocent as doves, but shrewd as serpents. Have a pure heart. Don't be dumb.
Don't be dumb.
Don't be dumb.
So
don't be dumb.
Hashtag.
Yeah, so that was a bad one. And again, as I go to this next clip, I really have I guess I take issue with just the continued. I'm sorry, what's the next clip? What are we on? The 15? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, this last one.
15 for okay. Yeah, so I guess I just really take issue with the continued just generalizations. You know what I mean? Like, she takes what some Christians do and then applies it to all Christians. And then another thing too, before we get to this last clip, and I'll cue it up. One thing I take issue with is like some of her examples pertain to like the public group behavior of some Christians, like, how they vote, how they behave, when it comes to like politics and whether they're for wokeism or not, and so forth. Like she's talking about kind of like that I guess a contingent of Christians on that scale. And she's using those examples to talk about, to say that Christians don't practice, loving their neighbor or blessing other people and doing good and so forth. But again, like why should we think that those kind of group behavior, those segments, represent what all Christians do in their personal lives? You have all the billions of Christians who might very well on a one-to-one level you know, maybe they have an enemy at their job, or somebody in their family, or somebody in an acquaintance, or somebody in the neighborhood to whom they pray for them, they bless them, and so on and so forth. That you would never see those things because you're not in their personal lives, right?
Right.
So most often, if you're going to have an enemy, it's probably going to be somebody within the circle of folks that you know. And Christians, for all she knows, could very well be doing a great job at exhibiting Luke chapter 6 toward those people, but she's not taking that into account. There's just no possible way that she can know that. And she's just saying, well, I'm just going to go off of what I see publicly and then just label all Christians by that. And so I think they're just kind of substituting the communal for the personal and just treating it as if it's all the same. It's just really bad form, I think.
Yeah, you know, Christians in India don't know anything about this right-left business. Okay, Christians in Africa, African Christians, South American, Caribbean, we don't know anything about this right-left woke business. Christians who are suffering in, you know, Muslim countries, they don't know anything about this, whatever she's talking about. They don't know anything about this. Okay. Again, just her scope is unrealistically, disingenuously, and hypocritically narrow.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Let's suffer through this last clip.
Let everyone be subject to governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. This is my favorite verse to bring up at election time because a large chunk of evangelical Christians are supporting this claim that there was a fraudulent election, that the election was rigged, it was stolen, the wrong guy got in office, and there is a big fuss about that. But how do you pair a belief in election fraud or wrong guy in the office with this verse that says everyone should be subject to governing authorities? There's no authority except that which God has established. And then it reiterates that and says the authorities that exist have been established by God. So if you do believe in God, if you believe in Jesus, you believe in his divine plan and that he always gets his way, that his will always prevails, then there can't be election fraud. There can't be the wrong guy in the office. That who is president is exactly who God wanted to be president, unless God makes mistakes, or God messed up this time, or something got past God. See, Christians have to believe that their God is not as powerful as he claims to be in the Bible in order for them to believe that the wrong thing happened when it came to the elections. And I bring up this verse because there are so many evangelical Christians that, you know, kind of live by this idea that there was something that was stolen from them. And they really believe that there is this kind of anti-Christian, leftist, woke agenda that is against them, and it is in power and it's coming after them and their rights. But if that's the case, according to the Bible, God wanted it to be that way. And so if you have these conservative Christians in your life who are fearful that the election was stolen from them, or fearful that, you know, it's all going to hell in a handbasket, as the Southern Baptists would say, you might bring up this verse to them and ask them, how do you feel about this? Do you believe that whoever is president, whether it's Biden or Trump, whoever gets in office is put there by God? And if so, do you believe you were to submit to them and their authority? They either have to admit that they are wrong or the Bible is wrong. And either way, it's not a good look. And again, there are so many other Bible verses that Christians tend to ignore, but I think this list is a really good starting point for when you're having these conversations with the Christians in your life, when they are being pushy or being judgmental or making claims of election fraud or whatever else that, you know, they say, the things that they say. I'm hoping that these verses can kind of be brought to light in these conversations, that you'll have the toolkit you need to at least expose their hypocrisy, but possibly change their mind or change their perspective or get them to think about things a different way.
All right. More generalization bars. Okay.
You nasty evangelicals, boy. Woo!
I tell you.
What we gonna do with y'all? What we gonna do with y'all, man? I don't know.
Oh man,
gosh darn it.
Yeah, so I mean, so now here's the thing. I try to, whenever possible, I try to find common ground with folks. I actually agree with her on some of what she said there. You know, now I think that she's generalizing from this kind of public, you know, CSNBC, Fox News
MSNBC,
representation of what's going on with Christian MSNBC. I was wow. I totally missed it. I don't know what I was. What I say, CSNBC or MSNBC? You know,
and Fox.
Yeah, so she's taking how groups of Christians are depicted in the news and applying that to all the Christianity. You know, and so to your previous point, I mean, goodness knows, like let's get outside the American bubble before we start labeling all Christians just based on what's going on here in America. That's not cool. So I think it's just really poor on her part. But but again, like here's where I agree. I think it is, you know, the idea, and I know, you know, a lot of people are going to disagree with this, even, you know, some people who might be my followers and so forth. I think the whole election being stolen thing is stupid. I really do. I don't think the election was stolen. I think that whole narrative is dumb. I think that, you know, in every, for me, maybe an even more poignant point is that people who tend to make that case are the same people. Now this is, I'm going to be specific and say I'm being anecdotal. Many of these people are, you know, they're pro-America. They believe you got to trust the system. You know, when African Americans, you know, talk about cases in court not going the right way, there's no, we got to trust the system. And, you know, this is what the outcome was. Like, these are the same groups of people, you know, often. But nevertheless, you know, they tend to be pro-America, pro-government. And then all of a sudden an election doesn't go the way that they wanted to. And they, you know, we got to challenge the election, storm the Capitol, you know, question it, you know, so on and so forth. In every that I'm aware of, in every court case where the election was challenged, Trump's case was shot down, you know, if not every, I mean, it's overwhelmingly so, you know,
by Trump appointed judges, by the way.
Trump appointed judges. So the stolen election narrative is as dumb as the birther narrative that Trump spurred about Obama when he first kind of launched into his political, you know, career. It's stupid, and Christians need to stop it. You know, that being said, I do want to, just from a logic standpoint, I do want to correct her on something where she said that if you believe that God is in control, then, you know, essentially there couldn't be election fraud because the guy got in the right way. Logically speaking, I think she's made a bad argument, because it could be a both and. You know, if you look at, for example, in the, you know, the book of Genesis with the story of Joseph, you know, where he's sold into slavery, he goes through all these things, and then eventually he reunites with his brothers. And one of the things he says is that, you know, what you meant for bad, God meant for my good. You know, so there are instances where God, or even, you know, with Jesus, you know what I'm saying, like the crucifixion, right? God can utilize the evil and wicked decisions of men to bring about his ultimate purposes. So it could very well be that there was a fraudulent election, and nevertheless, God utilized that as a mechanism to bring in the candidate that he wanted. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but just logically speaking, it's a possibility on the table. So she's presented a false dilemma there. So that's just not true. I think that the election stolen narrative is dumb just on other grounds, but I just want to clarify that right quick. I'll camp out there. There's some other thing I was going to say, but yeah.
I mean, I don't really have anything different to say than what I've been saying. I mean, I'll say it one more time. Christianity is not an American religion. That's it.
Right. So, I mean, she tried to be a little bit more careful, because she mentioned specifically evangelical Christians, right? But that's like me saying, you know, I'm not saying all Americans are crazy, just those who live in Florida. I'm like, I don't know everybody in Florida to make that statement.
Right.
So she narrowed the generalization.
Right. That's all she did. Right.
Right.
And yes, the Bible calls for us to respect those who are in leadership. Doesn't mean that we don't call them out in their sin. again, she's like conflating these things. We see this replete in the Old Testament, right? The prophets didn't come and try to do a political coup to get these wicked kings out of Israel, right? God allowed these kings to rule, but God also sent these prophets to check those who are in rulership.
Yeah.
Right. So, and yeah, there's going to be fraudulent behavior because people are sinners.
Right.
We live in a fallen world, so there's going to be fraud. Now, I'm not saying that fraud was committed, in January 6th. I agree with Adam 100%. I don't think any fraudulent behavior happened there, but people are fraudulent.
Mm-hmm.
People do commit fraud. Why? Because we're sinners. Why? Because we live in a fallen world. That's the world we live in. People are going to sin, and God allows that because He wants us to have the ability to make decisions. Right? Bad ones or good ones. And because He loves us enough to give us that. And unfortunately, because of how we are, we tend to make bad decisions, right?
Yeah.
But that's part of God's sovereignty to allow us to do such things because He loves us enough to give us free will and not make us automatons, which seems like she's kind of advocating for in a way, right? So, so we are to respect those who are in leadership. Absolutely. Doesn't mean that when those who are in leadership do something wrong, it doesn't mean that we don't say something. And that goes for the church too, right?
Sure.
If your pastor, your minister, your deacon, your evangelist, if they're doing things that are antithetical to the gospel, we should say something. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what title they possess. We say something.
We say something. Right? That's right.
So,
no, that's good. I'm just going to finish out here. I want to read it again. Romans 13:1. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God, and then it goes on to talk about, if you're rebelling against the authority, you're rebelling against God. I think what we're talking about when it comes to government as an institution, right? The institution of government is something that's God ordained. When you go back to, I'll make this quick, but Genesis 1:26, 1:27, we're made in the image of God. One of the ways, a component of that, if you will, is that we have this mandate to steward the earth and creation in a manner that lines up with God's will and His character, right? One of the ways that we live out that mandate of stewarding the earth, given that it's a collective project, is government. We have a meeting of the minds and resources and authority to in service to that goal of stewarding the earth. That's really what government is supposed to be about, right? So that being said, what she is complaining, this is what you alluded to, BK, is that it's not to affirm that government is ordained by God is not an endorsement of everything that governments do. That's two different things. I'm saying, like, you can respect the institution of government and that notion of collective authority without co-signing everything that governments do. And I think that's a real key distinction, because when you think about the Apostle Paul, who is the Apostle Paul? He's this leader in this young Christian movement. Okay. And so as far as we can tell, his writings are coming about even earlier than the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so you had this leader of this early Christian movement. Now, many of these people in the early Christian movement, they had been either aware of or a part of other movements, some of which would have been like zealots, rebellious groups and so forth, right? So either they were part of or aware of these other groups. So here you have all these different people from different walks of life coming into this Christian movement, and Paul is addressing, okay, well, what is this movement like? What is the character of the Christian movement? Okay, we're not trying to overthrow the government. That's not what we're about here. So he's laying that out. Like, you are not to be rebellious. And this is because if you think about Jesus' teachings, his teaching was he's overthrowing a kingdom, but it wasn't a natural kingdom, right? They would have thought that, he about to just wreck shop and, get rid of the Romans, so on and so forth. Paul's like, no, that's not what this is. Be not on that type of time. All right. So don't be out here disrespecting authorities, rebelling and wilding out, because you're giving a black eye to this Christian movement. The character of this Christian movement is different. Now, just one more point in the verse before. Now, remember, like I said, these scriptures, the Bible wasn't originally written with chapter and verse. I'm saying it was just one. So Romans would have just been one letter. But for our purposes, if you just look at the verse right before it, which would be the last verse in chapter 12, it says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." That's what he says immediately before he talks about respecting authorities, right? So the vibe here is like, don't be out here reckless and just like rebellious. Like the way, if there's evil in the world, the way you overcome it is with good. Okay, we're not like this. We're not trying to start off a civil war out here. That's not what this is, right? And so I think what happens, Romans 13, I think is a very misunderstood verse. I think in regard to from conservatives, all the way to the left. I think many people misunderstand it. But what it is not saying is that we should just ride, like everything the government does is cool. You know what I'm saying? Yes, God is sovereign. Yes, he's over the authorities and has established government. But at the same time, we ought to overcome evil with good.
Yeah,
man. So apparently we had a lot to say about in response to Kristi here. Like I didn't think that it would be this much, but there was a lot to chew on. You guys have any final thoughts as we kind of camp out here?
Well, let me just say this. I am glad that this did come across BK's feed. I think that, and as she alluded to in her closing, she has this understanding that these are like wins for her. Like all of these things that she mentioned are valid ways to essentially get Christians. But upon further inspection, it's not as much as the win as she thinks it is. I mean, she literally just made the Bible say what she wanted to, and then chastised Christians for not living in accordance to that.
Right.
Not a win.
Yeah, definitely not a win. I think you muted BK. See, I'm not the only one that does it. But
No. I'm sorry. So let me say this one. I said this verse, but I love how the King James renders 2 Corinthians 10:5, right? Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. That's what we do as apologists. We cast down people's imagined slights against the gospel.
Yeah, that's good.
Like we're called to do that. She imagines these things to be true, so much so that she's dedicated an entire channel of how she imagines Christianity to be. And those of us who are believers, when we see anyone doing that, it is up to us to push back and challenge and to cast down such imaginations. So
that's good stuff, man. That's good, man. So you will camp out there. Shout out to folks out there in Tru-ID world. You know what I mean? Thanks for riding with us. Much more to come. We dropping these on a weekly basis. So, we having a good time. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Can I steal that slogan now?
Feel free. Yes, you can.
Your co-host? Okay, good. Cool. Tell a friend to tell a friend that it's us again. I can do that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Y'all know what it is, man. Tru-ID Apologetics, Tru-ID Podcast. As we say all the time, love God, love people, take care of things that God blesses you with.